Welcome to the in-between,
where shift happens,
the moment between where we are
and where we are going.
We will ask all the questions,
maybe find some answers,
and generally work at being okay.
In the mystery of the in-between.
And today, in this episode, we are talking about why you should not just get over it. Which sounds maybe like a random topic, but I promise it is very relevant.
Yes.
If
you don't like it, just get over it. No.
Yeah, that's right. Get over it. So welcome to the In-Between, where shift happens. This is the official podcast of Solo Evolution Collaborative. And the gist of this is we agree on a topic. One of us comes with questions that the other one has never heard. And we get to be here with you in the in-between in this very unscripted and real experience of dealing with real life topics, typically ones that we don't necessarily like to talk about or experience. And yet
that's our goal, to talk about things you don't want to talk about.
Make you as uncomfortable as possible.
Check.
Yeah, done. So, the context for today's topic, why you should not just get over it. The other day, I was in a group conversation, facilitating a group conversation, and someone had this really beautiful sharing about breaking generational cycles and how they were, decades later, healing trauma, their trauma, generational trauma, things that had been passed on, right? And it was a really great sharing. And in moments like that, I have found that we can often really appreciate someone sharing like that because we can relate to it.
Yeah.
And also, it can also make us really uncomfortable. And in times when it makes us uncomfortable, it's really easy to respond with kind of those very typical, those very like jargony, catchphrasey kind of things. And someone else a moment later basically chimed in and was like, I don't know why we have to keep living in the past. Just get over it. Move on. That's in the past. Just look ahead. This, we're in one of the most peaceful times in history. Why do we have to keep looking back at all the bad stuff that's ever happened?
That's helpful.
And it was like, oh. So, it's like, wow. All right. And, so I'm here trying to have compassion for both the person of who they're sharing, who basically just got interrupted, and also the person who was made so uncomfortable that they essentially had to lash out and interrupt the discomfort by like, don't you dare make me feel something I don't want to feel, or visit memories I don't want to visit, or like, I'm not ready to go there or do that. Maybe I'm never going to be ready to go there or do that. So you need to stop.
Right.
Was kind of the gist. And so I'm sitting here trying to have compassion for both of those things. And also, it kind of turned into like a teaching moment of like, well, wait a minute. Like, I don't know that trauma is a in the past thing. Like, yeah, the event happened in the past, and that trauma, one of the reasons it is traumatic and becomes like a trauma response is because it keeps happening. The trauma over and over. And those people are living that thing.
Well, we're always living our present moment is the impact of the past. I mean, we're doing that all the time, right? I mean, that's just how it works. Our influences, our things,
As much as we don't want it to.
Yeah, or as much as, like every little thing like informs our present. That's why it's important to look at it, right?
Yeah. So I think let's just jump in and kick it off with, in general, what has your experience been with the just get over it and the stop looking in the past and move forward? And all of those kind of bypassy, like toxic positivity. And I don't think we mean it as toxic positivity, but like just be so positive that we're just going to ignore all the things we don't like that.
I think you kind of touched on a little bit, but I think often we have those responses, and we're talking about this particular type of response, like just get over it. But we do this all the time with those sorts of responses where we're like so like uncomfortable with like the discomfort of things, the emotions of things, however it shows up, that we want to like shift it to something that's more positive. Now, sometimes that's related to our own discomfort. And then sometimes it's related, and I mean, it's a very compassionate sort of intent of like, oh, I just want you to be happy and not to suffer,
Mm,
and I want you to be able to live life fully, and those sorts of things. And so,
really well intentioned.
right, well intentioned, but the impact
Yeah,
is what I'm feeling right now is not right.
right,
What I'm feeling
right.
right now is wrong. So I need to do something in order to feel something different, because however I'm showing up right now is not correct. And so I think that that is the often unintended impact of those sorts of things. And we know that impact over intent, right? We sometimes the impact of what we say is so far off of our intent, which is also why it's important for us to continue to look at those things. Now, this
Yeah,
doesn't mean that, like, I think there is a fine line. I mean, I think we can get caught in the cycle of things so much. And I think that's what sometimes people are often speaking to. But I think
yeah,
it is fundamentally a discomfort with discomfort.
yeah,
And fundamentally, not being it brings that, it stirs something within us, and we're not, maybe we don't even know the name of what that is, but it stirs something in us, whether it's from our own stuff or someone else's, and then that we speak, well, why can't we just get over it?
yeah,
And I think it also serves to, it's a very privileged response, and it serves to really invalidate the real life experiences of people. Oftentimes people's whose life experiences are different from our own. So, right? And so
yep,
if I have an
yep,
experience that is in alignment with the experiences being shared, I may respond differently. But if you're sharing something and I don't have that life experience, then often I've seen people be like, "Well, why do we have to live in the past?" Well,
yeah,
easy for you to say, right?
yeah,
I mean,
right,
right? And so it's like, especially a lot of these like systemic sort of impacts on
yeah,
people's lives. So yeah, I think for me, that's where I've seen it. That's where I've felt it. And let's be honest, it's probably at where I've said it too. I mean, we've all done it. I mean, this is
for
not
sure.
pointing
Yeah,
out this particular person in that particular
right,
conversation.
right.
It's just this way of responding from, and we've all done it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, you mentioned, like, it's kinda like an unconscious thing, but I think it's
Mhm.
also something that's so familiar because it is a very like, culturally, it's a very, like, common response, and I think we've all kind of fallen into that pattern, at least at times, of like, "Oh, this is how I respond to." It's kinda
Mhm.
like you're at a funeral and you hand somebody tissues, like,
Yeah,
it seems like a nice thing to do, but, like, in reality, I'm handing you the tissue to make me feel like I'm doing something helpful, and maybe you actually need a tissue, like, maybe it is helpful,
right.
but it really like, the intent is, I want to be helpful, but also it's to comfort me because I don't like seeing you upset,
Yeah.
and I think it's such a, like, an ingrained cultural, maybe it's partly biological, I don't know, but I think it really is like it's such a familiar
Script,
response.
like a
The
script that we're
script, yeah,
all playing,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. Uh,
Societal script, yeah.
yeah, yeah, I wanna go back for a second because you said, s we all know impact over intent, and I gotta be honest, I didn't know that. I hadn't really thought about that until several months ago when it kinda became a big topic for us.
Mm,
The idea that that impact is, well, I'm assuming that impact is more important than intent. I have come to believe that impact is more important than intent, and I think that's a new idea for a lot of people. So I let like different topic, but really related. Let's not brush over like,
yeah. Because
yeah,
impact is the only real thing.
right.
Intent is this energy behind something, but how it actually shows up is the impact, and that's the
Yeah,
only tangible, that the impact is the tangible thing of our
yeah,
intent.
yeah. And what's interesting, what really caught me about that, when I'm sure I've heard it before in the past, it just never really struck like it did. I mean, we're talking probably 4 or 5 months, like, recently, right?
Yeah.
And it just really struck me in a different way because we've come up through a philosophy that puts a lot of emphasis on intentions. Set your intentions. What are your intentions? What do you want to happen? And like, oh wow, that's a like what a shift on that concept of like it's not about your intentions. Like in a way, people could care less about your intent. Now, like for me, yeah, my intentions are important, but also I can't stop there.
Right.
I have to I also have to see what my impact is. Like I may have the best intentions in the world, but if the way that plays out is nothing like that or harming people or uh, whatever,
Well,
if
that's a
they
big
don't
part of
line up,
spirit.
that's not a great
Yeah, I
thing.
mean,
That's no good.
and that's a big part of spirituality, right? Is making sure that our intent and our impact are
Yeah.
lining
Yeah.
aligned. And yes, I mean, obviously, we can't be responsible um, for people's responses, but we
Right.
can be responsible to them and how
Yeah.
we are communicating,
Yeah.
how we're showing up, how we
Yeah.
are creating space, right?
Yeah.
It's
And
nuance, isn't it? It's not
it
as
is.
simple as
It is.
create, like you said, set your intention and all else will be
Yeah. Yeah.
set in motion, right?
And 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 that idea of responsible not to not for others, but to others,
Mhm.
that's something we've talked about for
Oh,
years.
yeah, yeah.
And yet something about putting the language of impact over intent just added a whole other depth to it for
Mm,
me of like,
yeah.
oh wow, yeah, right. Like there's one thing about being completely unaware of how I'm influencing my scenario and the effect that has on others. But something about the word impact, like, oh, the impact that I'm having on others. I don't know, maybe that's just me, but like just something about that word where I was like, oh man, that's a
Mm.
whole other it's like a whole other ball game. That's a whole other realm of awareness.
Well, and especially in the context of, like, how we started this, like, the story that you told, right? I mean,
Yeah,
someone
right.
who was really, kind of rejoicing in this, uh, ability to shift intergenerational trauma and its
Yeah,
impact, and
yeah,
then how just a simple response could just shut that down, right? And
yeah,
so, like, if my actions and my words don't create expansion in others, if they create constriction and smallness and sinking back in, then I need to evaluate my
yeah,
responses and where I'm
yeah,
coming from, or I need to think before I speak,
yeah,
which I understand is a learned skill for most, um, right?
yeah,
And for me, right, is to begin to, like, take a breath. I always try to do that, especially in situations where other people are sharing their experiences, and I really want to kind of jump into the
mm,
convo
yeah.
to remind myself to take a breath and let, like, that everything shake out first and then speak. I think sometimes taking a breath has been my saving grace to saying to not saying
Uh,
things that I
yeah.
probably shouldn't say.
Yeah. So that kind of touches on my next question, which is why is the get over it mentality dangerous? Because I think it is. I think dangerous is
Mm.
kind of a sharp word, a pokey word, but I think really apropos, really relevant to this topic. Like, why is it so dangerous?
Ooh, how long do we have to talk about
Well,
why it's so dangerous? I mean, my goodness, I could just spat out. I mean, it's dangerous that it invalidates people's experiences. It's
yeah.
dangerous, and it says that you have to react, respond in this certain way. It's
Mm,
dangerous because it encourages people to suppress their emotions, their responses,
yeah.
their thoughts, their feelings. It's dangerous because it forces some sort of normal and how we can relate to the experiences of our lives. Let's
Yeah.
see. It's dangerous
I promise
because
y'all, we have not shared these questions before. So
right.
this
I
is
mean,
all
it's dangerous on all those. I mean, I could go on and on and
yeah,
on,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
It
yeah,
is dangerous because fundamentally it really impacts our ability to actually see other folks, to lean into their experiences, to lean into um, these experiences with empathy and compassion. Um,
mm,
and it stunts our own ability to do the same thing, because when we're shutting down someone else with that response, we're also shutting it down within ourselves, right?
yeah,
Because nothing can get in, nothing can get out, right? In these times where we create this really smallness, it's not that we're I mean, like, it goes both ways, and so what happens is this, like, just get over mentality, if we say it, to others, we're probably also saying it to ourselves because it is a dialogue that's within us.
Yeah.
And so every time that something arises in our experience that may need to be looked at or addressed,
Just get over
the
it.
script is just get over it, focus on the positive, right? And you can only sustain that for so long before it becomes so detrimental to all else aspects of your
Yeah.
well-being.
Yeah.
And I think, right, so it's just not a one-sided impact. It impacts
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah. And what's coming to mind right now is like I want to make space, I think, for there seem to be a lot of like fMRI studies and like
Mhm.
neurobiology, I don't know, whatever neurological fields there are that are studying this kind of thing, but like a lot of articles coming out in the last year or two about the benefits of thinking positively
Yeah.
and how the brain reacts and how you can create new neural pathways by focusing on the positive. And I saw one the other day that was the title was something like every time you stop yourself from feeling angry, you help rewire your brain. And I'm like, that sounds
That
so
sounds weird.
not right. But when you get into the article, it's like every time you stop yourself from reacting to your anger, then you can help rewire your brain. And what I found was interesting was when you actually get into the article, it's like you're not actually stopping yourself from being angry. You're just stopping yourself from reacting from your anger. So you still feel the angry,
Right.
still feel the emotion, but you can rewire your reaction, which I'm like, oh yeah, like well, that
Right.
I want to say, well, we've known that for years,
Right,
but
yeah,
now,
learn
it's
responses,
yeah,
default
yeah.
responses, yeah.
Um, so I think there is a lot of like misinformation or misinterpretation of this whole like, oh, but when you think positively, neuroscientifically, well,
And what is
actually,
positive, right? And that's the whole thing,
yeah,
positive is also relative.
right,
It's relative,
right,
it's influenced
yeah,
by, like,
yeah,
so many different things, so there's not just one thing that's positive.
yeah,
That's the that's the danger of labeling
yeah,
experiences or labeling emotions, right? I
right,
mean, we don't label emotions as positive or negative either, right?
yeah,
Some of them are, because it's just information. Some of them are
yep,
more challenging to feel and express,
yeah,
than
and
others, but
and
there's
and
no
that's different
negative
for everybody.
emotions. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. Uh, so how do you think this kind of get over it, stop living in the past mentality has influenced us societally? Because I think we're seeing a lot of the ramifications of that, of decades of that.
Yeah. It's like, I think we're seeing the ramifications, we're seeing the impact of unexpressed emotions. We're seeing the
Yeah,
impact of, uh, unrecognized impact of trauma and traumatic experiences. We're seeing the impact
yeah,
in our ability to respond empathetically to one another, right? Because I don't
mm,
have to have empathy if I just tell you to get over it.
yeah,
Like, I don't
yeah,
have to look at that space within myself where I have felt the same way that you have felt
yeah,
if I just say get over it. So then we lose this ability for empathetic response. And I think too, we lose this ability to respond to systemic frameworks that keep people marginalized and oppressed.
damn it,
Um,
are we coming back around to rugged individualism again?
well, and I mean, I don't know if it necessarily is that, but I do think that the just get over it, if we just do that, then we don't have to look at the things that have
Yeah,
actually caused
yeah,
the thing that's being expressed, right? Because
yeah,
we know that it's layered. There are systems, frameworks, ways of being, ways of operating that have perpetually kept certain individuals in certain situations. I mean, that's, I mean, you can't really argue with that. It is obvious. We can see it. I mean, I guess you could argue with it. But
yeah,
You would be wrong, but, not to
Yeah.
make anyone wrong, but in my opinion. And so then if I say get over it, then I don't have to look at it, and I also don't have to look at what I've done to contribute to it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And,
I think
it all boils down to we're just uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. Instead of saying, "Wow, I showed up in a way I didn't," or "Wow, I've contributed to, a system or framework that I don't wanna contribute to anymore. I made a mistake."
yeah. Yeah.
And then begin to react, right? Because we also have created this culture of can't make mistakes either. So people are so afraid to be wrong that we
Yeah.
just ask everyone to stuff things down because we don't want to, like, right?
Yep.
It's just this weird
Yeah. Because
perpetuating that.
then you're yeah, if you're wrong, then there's something wrong about you or something wrong with you, or
Yeah, it just
you're
goes
not lovable. People are gonna leave you and abandon you,
talk about
and you're not
generational
worth
trauma
yeah,
too.
seriously. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're not worthy or
Yeah.
yeah. Yikes. Which again, coming back to compassion, I think shines some light on why we culturally, societally are so uncomfortable with discomfort.
Yeah.
Because we haven't really set the stage in any mass way for people to handle discomfort. And
Yeah.
so when the practice was sweep it under the rug, that's what was learned. That's what was passed on. That's the skill set that most of us have.
Mhm.
Is That's the coping mechanism, is to sweep it under the rug. Like, oh well, this is uncomfortable, and we're just gonna ignore it long enough that hopefully it just goes away.
Well, and I think we are seeing I mean, I think we're seeing this conversation more and more, so I
Yeah,
think I'm hopeful for our ability to, like,
yeah,
begin to shift this, and, like, we shifted in our own experiences, right? We shifted
yeah,
first in our own experience. Where are we shutting other people down? Where are we telling people to get over it? Whether it's those exact words or our actions, our behaviors, right? Our responses, where are we doing that?
yeah,
And then where can we begin to shift that? Because I think we're at a really, um, empowering point where we can begin to shift that,
yeah,
in our spiritual communities, right? Are we creating spaces, where we're telling people to just get over it and think positively, or just get over it and do this spiritual practice, right? Are we doing that?
yep,
Whether it's just by our actions or how we're, teaching, or how we're, like, expressing some of these ideas and spiritual principles and things like that. So I think that all is not lost, I guess is what I'm saying, that
yeah,
we do
yeah,
have this really powerful ability to shift this script, to rewrite a new script,
yeah,
or even just to throw away the script and allow people to show up as they are and then rejoice. Like, that was a beautiful opportunity for this individual to rejoice and, like, wow, man, this is just so amazing. And what you have shifted, that means I can shift it too, right? And I can begin to, right? And so, like, when we begin to celebrate
yeah,
those realizations, I think too, that also, um, or sit with people in their in the challenge of things as they show up, right?
yeah, yeah. I think it also it provides an interesting opportunity to kind of hone our skills of like learning who to share things with and when to share things. Like
Mm,
for each
discernment.
yeah, yeah, right, right. For each of us to find a space in a group. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's two people, maybe it's a whole community,
Yeah.
but to find that space where it really is okay to share like that, and to yeah, develop the discernment ability to know when maybe this isn't the space to share that depth,
Yeah.
right? Because I think that's a newer skill for a lot of us too, is I think it can get really exciting, like, "Oh, cool, yeah, like-minded people and a positive philosophy. I'm gonna share all my stuff," and not realize that we're all showing up with stuff that's gonna get
Mm,
poked at, and
yeah.
somebody's bound to react to something in a way that if they knew, they probably wouldn't do intentionally, but,
Right.
that's it's kinda just part of being human, so I think knowing where that group is that we can share at that level, and then knowing what level we're comfortable sharing in other spaces, and
Yeah.
what places really just aren't safe to do that,
Yeah.
because that is a true thing. Like, to really just There are a lot of places right now where it's not the place to do it.
Yeah.
Not the place to do it. Um, so yeah, I think there's definitely things that we can start doing individually and collectively to start shifting this whole conversation. And I think you're right. I think it started a long time ago. It really has, just
Mhm.
kind of in a grassroots way. And so we're starting to see the conversation show up more and more, and we're starting to see places where it really is an okay place, a safe place to share in those ways. Um, but I think we're probably going to continue encountering people in places where we inadvertently share in a way that does poke at somebody, triggers their reaction, and we are met with that like just get over it mentality. So what are some things that, for the person who is doing the work and incidentally runs into the just get over it? Like how do we react to that? How do we manage that? Because I think it very easily could just lead to just like shutting down, like, "Oh, okay, I'm never sharing again." Like it's
Mhm.
clear
Yeah.
that's not an okay way to be, so I'm just not going to do it. Which I don't think is something we want to have happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I would offer some suggestions on the other end of people saying that.
Yeah.
First, is
Sure.
like to look back, anyone who's listened to this, myself included, you included too,
Yeah, yeah.
like, where have I said that? Where have I said that? In what instance, in what circumstance, in what conversation have I said that, those exact words, or have my actions kind of
Yeah.
insinuated that, right? And then
Yeah.
look underneath, like, what's that about? Like, what was activated in my own experience that caused me to react or respond from that space, right? And then I would encourage people to recognize everyone has a story, everyone has a journey, everyone has an experience. And you can't know or understand any of that, right? And to be very mindful of these simple little quippy sort of responses to like lifelong experiences that we know nothing about,
Yeah.
just like we have those, right? So just being more mindful that your experience isn't the only one, and right, and also this desire to make other people wrong in order to make us feel better about our own experiences. And sometimes that shows up subtly, right? And so on the flip side, people who are like receiving that information of just get
Mm.
over it, I mean, it depends on your comfort level. I would say, no, thank you very much. I think I'm going to not do that. Um,
Yeah.
right? I think that, to put it on people to defend their experiences, I think is a little bit unfair. But
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I think in just within themselves understanding just like that we all have experiences, we all have things, we all have certain circumstances that activate something in us, and realizing, trying to discern that those responses are from that place. Um, trying not to internalize other people's discomfort around conversations. And I think collectively, just normalizing conversations around emotions, around difficult topics, around trauma, around like intergenerational trauma, around healing of that, or moving through it, navigating it, right? Because I don't know that healing doesn't mean getting over. I think that is a misconception too. That if we're still talking about it, if we're still processing um, uh, or if we've talked about healing it, that we need to, that means we get over it, never talking about it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think healing is not like this tangible thing that happens and then
It's done.
boom, it's done, right? Just like grief, right? You will always have grief.
Yeah.
You will change your relationship to it. So just like these experiences, you will always have traumatic experience, or the memories of traumatic
Yeah.
experiences. We will always have them because that's our brains. Unless something happens within our brain that impacts our ability to remember things, we'll have the memories of those things. Our relationship will be different to it. It will activate us in different ways, right? But we're always going to have those things. And so getting over it will never happen if getting over it means don't talk about it or don't remember it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's an interesting perception because I think there is like this, I don't know, angle on healing that like, oh, once I heal, that thing then never happened, and I'll be totally
Oh,
I'll be normal again,
I
or
hate to break it to you.
yeah, right. But
Right?
isn't that the way it's kind of presented in a lot of
Mhm.
places that like
Yeah.
healing will fix it, like it as if it never happened,
And then
when that
people think they're
really
doing
ain't
it
it.
wrong if it doesn't, right?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're still feeling it, if you're still thinking about it, if you still remember it, then you're doing it wrong. You just need to go do it harder, do it more, do it better or something.
Heal
And
yourself in 3 easy steps, right?
yeah, and that
Overwork
really
that
ain't
out.
it. And
Yeah.
not only is that not it, but it's never really done. Like you don't actually like healing is a process. It's not like a follow these instructions and then you finish and you're complete. Like it's a
Mhm.
ongoing thing, which I think kind of reframes the experience of like when you share something and then somebody kind of pipes up and shuts it down, because isn't it always the archetype of the person who gets who pipes up and says something, isn't it always the same archetype as the person in the traumatic event that perpetrated the thing in the first place? Because typically I think what we share is poking in that other person, with probably without them knowing. It's poking in them their ability to have done that same thing
Or to have that same thing done to them.
or
Yeah.
have that same thing done to
Mhm.
them. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it there's no like coincidence in who's sharing and who's the one kind of responding. And so for sure, if you're the one getting shut down, that person is definitely gonna have there's a strong possibility that they're gonna re-trigger something about what you just shared because of the relationship between why they're getting why they're getting triggered without knowing it to pipe up and say the thing in the first place. So it kind of reframes it a little bit in an interesting way of like, oh yeah, that's like, I don't know, it kind of, for me it brings a little more compassion, an easier sense of compassion for me to see both sides of what's
Oh,
happening,
yeah.
you know.
'Cause both
um
sides need empathy and compassion, right? But,
yeah,
I mean, both
yeah,
not that they're sides, but both expressions,
yeah,
um, that we're talking about, um, need that.
yeah,
Everyone needs that and deserves that, yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I know for me, it's easy for my mama bear to get going and side with the underdog. The ones who are getting bullied.
Yeah.
Um, so what would be your, like, one takeaway from this conversation? If we were to wrap this all up and you were to give one piece of information to everybody listening, what's the main nugget here?
I think just in the context of this conversation is to look at your own experiences and where you have showed up in the just get over it mindset,
Mm,
whether it's to others or to yourself, right? And to have some empathy and compassion for others and for yourself.
yeah,
And look, it's like what's underneath that? Like what is the fear? What is the discomfort? And just sit with that. Just I don't know, be in inquiry about that, right?
yeah,
There's not necessarily something to do, but I think the more we're in this conversation, more that we're in inquiry about what's underneath, I think the more we look at that, more it will be revealed to us those things that like, ah, that's what that's about. Okay, well, what can I do to look at that aspect, right? I think for me, that's the big takeaway because I think that we all have a responsibility in that.
yeah, yeah. Sounds a whole lot like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes, the in between. Hmm.
Kinda, yeah. Be a good idea for a podcast.
It might be.
Well, thank you all for tuning in and hanging with us in this potentially uncomfortable conversation. And that's kind of the point. The more we do it, the more we practice it, I don't know. I was going to say easier. I don't know if it gets easier. The more familiar it becomes.
You're welcome.
Yeah. But yeah, being in between, that's, the in between is where the shift happens. It really is. So thank you for being here. Thanks for checking this out. And we will see you next time in the in between where shift happens.
Nobody really enjoys being in the in-between.
But thanks for being here anyway.
We may not have found all the answers,
but certainly some. And maybe more importantly,
a little shift has happened.
And the beauty of it all is that we are not alone in the in-between.
So until next time, we hope a lot of shift happens.